Hey guys, I'm Cam here at OxCon. I'm with an amazingly talented and very funny man. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Gosh. Hi, I'm Tim Rose, and I know you probably don't recognize me, but you have seen me an awful lot of times over the past. I worked with Jim Henson and did a lot of the Muppet movies, and I also worked with Star Wars. And the main character that I'm known for is Admiral Ackbar in Return of the Jedi, who once said quite famously, "It's a trap."
Awesome. I love how you have the sign. That's brilliant.
I'd like to say it was my idea. It was actually some fans that came up to my table, and they were all standing there and giggling away, and they're all like that. And I said, "That is a brilliant idea. Can I have one of those? I'll trade you 5 signed photographs for it."
That's amazing. So you work as a puppeteer a lot of the time. So what got you into that? What made you decide that's the career you wanted to do?
I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I'd always been experimenting. I'd been building things in my dad's workshop. I once did the reenactment of the Monitor and the Merrimack, 2 American Civil War ships that had a battle. I made simple puppets, and it wasn't until I was at university and was doing graphics art that I realized that all these forms came together in puppetry. I could sculpt things, I could write scripts, I could be an actor, I could act a fool, and I didn't need to not do something for another thing because everything I enjoyed all rolled into puppetry.
So you worked on the original trilogy, you were in Return of the Jedi, doing a lot of amazing characters that a lot of fans that you would know you for. What would you say is your favourite story from working on those sets? Like, you did...
No, that one's too long to tell.
One of them then, my friend.
Well, one of the, Warwick Davis,
yes,
who's one of the Ewoks, he was one of the little guys. Warwick was probably only 14, 15 years old when he was doing Return of the Jedi. And one of my memories was that I'd step out the studio door, and Warwick was a very keen skateboarder. And the image of Warwick at 3'0", a kid this tall, hammering past the door at 2 foot, straight past you.
Like, that's brilliant.
Did I see that? And Kenny Baker, he had a great big Mercedes estate in those days. And the first time I saw Kenny, he drove into the studio in his Mercedes estate. And you look with, well, I guess that's him. And then the car parked, and the door opened, and Kenny just disappeared behind the door and then came around the side of it. So things like that is not something that you experience every day, so they stick in your mind, when you see them. So.
Those are so amazing. So with some of your other puppets, you used to work for Henson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what was that like? You used to work on some of the feature films, didn't you?
My wife always teases me. I always describe that as the days of King Arthur's court, where it was always sunny and never rained. But it was true. Jim, I got in a lot of trouble. Well, I got fired a lot because Jim was the most unique boss I'd ever had, whereas most bosses tell you what to do and we want it done our way or you go down the highway. Jim actively encouraged all of us to have our own opinions about things, and he wanted to hear all our opinions. And I think part of his success was that he listened to all the good ideas and bad ideas, and then he would cherry pick the good ideas, and that's part of the magic that was created in his films. Was he was willing to listen to everybody, and anything that was good he'd give you the time to work on and try and create and improve. And so it was like being able to work in a very expensive playpen where you just felt like you were playing and laughing all day long, but you got to make all these wonderful things at the same time. So
brilliant. So you've worked for a very long time in puppeteering. From like you say,
yes, I'm an old man.
That's not what I meant. from Return of the Jedi time to late 80s, early 80s to today when you're working on Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, how would you say like the technology of the animating of these puppets just changed?
Well, I'm slightly frustrated with that. The technology itself just keeps getting better and better. But what I've discovered more recently is the people that understand how to film it are slowly disappearing. It's like with Jim, we developed a whole series of techniques about how to make this stuff look really good. Any animatronic has 100 things it does really bad and a couple of things that it really does well and really believable. So you discover what those are, and then you just exploit the hell out of whatever it does really well. And now they tend to just sort of bring us on set and stand us there and go, why isn't he going where he needs to go? And it's like, well, I can't even see in this costume until you tell me which direction to walk in, you know. And it's that, so the technical side of it is much more frustrating now, because the people who know what you need and how to give it to you seem to not be around as much as they used to be.
What would you say is a note you would give to like current or future directors to do when working with puppeteers on set?
Well, as I said to J.J. Abrams, he came over and he said, you keep missing your close-up. And I said, I didn't know I was in a close-up. And he said, yeah. You come over to John Boyega and you say this line to him, which isn't in the movie now, but it was one that we were filming on the day. And I said, Mr. Abrams, at the moment, I can see out of my right nostril, I can tell that you're that far away from me, and now I can tell you're that far away from me. Put me where you want to be in front of John, and I'll hit my close-up every time, but you need to help me with this. You need to tell me, because I can't see, I can't see out of here. And that's the sort of thing I've been trying to explain, is that we do such a good job of bringing them alive, they treat them like they're actors, and they're not. They're very high-quality special effects animatronic characters. So
then what would you say then is your favorite animatronic that you've worked on throughout your career? That's a really difficult question, but
the one I'm the proudest of was the Howard the Duck, just because he was the star of the show. I got brought over there to actually make a workable duck, because they had been working on it but hadn't achieved something that we could film on at the point when I arrived. And what amazed me was that although he was the male lead, he was the star of the show, if you'd been doing a movie that, say, the male lead was Harrison Ford or any other actor, you would never set a start date on the production until you had the lead actor signed on contract and fully committed to the movie. Because the lead actor was a puppet, everything else just trundled along, and I didn't know, honestly, if I was going to have a duck that worked or not at the point when we turned over, but it didn't seem to matter to anybody. Oh yeah, he'll sort that bit out and we'll just do the rest of the movie. And it's like, it was very nerve-wracking and very hard work, but we did get there in the end when the time came.
It is a really impressive
stood up to the plate and got the job done. So
it's really impressive, though. I even though a lot of people it's poorly reviewed, I do think that the actual effects of the film themselves really like up there.
It was the only movie that I actually ever had points on. That means that if a movie does well, you'll get paid money afterwards, not just when you're working on the movie. And it was released in the UK, and the reviewer at the time was Barry Norman. Oh. He was very powerful in the business as a reviewer. And Barry Norman came on TV and said, Howard the Duck, Howard the Turkey more like. And it lasted 2 weeks in the cinema, and I made no extra money on it whatsoever. And it wasn't until years later, I was doing a convention in Sweden, and they came over and they said, so where are your Howard the Duck pictures? And I said, why? Nobody remembers that movie. And they said, oh, you're joking. Here in Sweden, it's as big as Star Wars. And it was true. The promoter there went and got me some pictures, and I sold out of my Howard the Duck pictures in Sweden. So you can never tell, what's one man's trash is another man's gold. So,
brilliant.
Oh, but they said to me, I'm not trying to offend any Swedish people, but in my own words, they said, please, we see in IMDb that you work for Muppets. And I said, yes. And they said, please, could you explain why is the Swedish chef so funny? And I just went, I'm going to have a real hard time explaining that one. But anyway, so I let that one slip and moved on to the next topic of conversation. So,
What would you say is your favourite moment in puppeteering throughout your whole career?
Oh, gosh.
So far.
I'm afraid we'll have to just stop and let me think for a couple of hours.
That's fine.
My favorite moment. I don't have a single favorite moment. No.
Cool.
No. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I watched your panel earlier. There'll be a link to it somewhere else on the channel. But you saw some
I
amazing...
better not repeat all my stories then. Okay.
But you did some amazing stories about so many, and I believe you would have much more.
Oh yeah. Okay.
It's like puppeteering is one of those industries that you don't think about it a lot from the perspective of the common audience member, but there's far more there and inside it than there
Tell
is.
a story about David Bowie then. He was on Labyrinth, right? He played the king in the Labyrinth. And when he first came in, he had this lady that we called the Bulldog. She came over to us and she said, when Mr. Bowie is sitting in his director's chair, that means he's resting and he's not to be disturbed. Nobody is to talk to him. And when Mr. Bowie is smoking a cigarette, because this was when you could smoke cigarettes inside, that's how long ago I'm talking. When Mr. Bowie is smoking a cigarette, that means that he is taking a break and he's not to be bothered by anybody. And of course she's saying all this to the guys who worked for the Muppet Show, and we'd had every person from all over the world begging to get onto the TV show because it would reboost their careers and everything. So the first day when David sat down in his director's chair, 30 of us surrounded him and said, "Oh, Mr. Bowie, I really love that album he did there," and everything. And basically, he was having so much fun with us that after 2 days, he told the Bulldog that he didn't need her on set anymore. And we had a great time all working together. So
when it comes to building these puppets, what is the average process? And it obviously depends depending on the job. But like with the Muppets, for example, what was the process it took from design to product?
Wow, is that a difficult question to answer? Well, like the Dark Crystal, you had a designer like Brian Froud who had come up with original concepts. So your problem was to make a two-dimensional thing three-dimensional. On the Muppet Show, it was usually driven by a bit of somebody's comedic inspiration. So you would be coming up with a character that just fit into the gag that they were trying to do for that specific bit. That question is pretty much a book unto itself to
it's fine.
to try and answer. Yes.
So apart from The Last Jedi, obviously we cannot talk,
We can't possibly talk
God,
about
no.
that. No.
But is there any other projects that you're working on at the moment?
I'm building things for my friend Paul Zerden, who's a ventriloquist, and I build animatronic backups for his characters. I always have to think about that. We're making two new characters for him.
That's cool.
He's got a secret agent thing or a CIA man or something, but the concept for him is that he wants to be like a secret agent, so that he comes onto stage and he has a case with him that looks like a sniper's rifle case. And he puts the case down and he starts assembling this thing, and you think he's putting his sniper's rifle together, but when he lifts it up, it's actually the CIA agent, and then he goes into this whole little CIA routine. And I've got to make it so that his sunglasses lift up and his eyes can dart around, because he's a really shifty character who doesn't trust anybody because he's a CIA agent. He knows everybody is a spy, So it's a fun bit. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Now, if I'm correct, you also did the Giant in the Oxford Playhouse's Jack and the Beanstalk. The reason I bring this up, I was in that show.
Oh yeah.
I was a young child cast at the time, and it was terrifying.
Yeah, it was a few years ago. Yeah.
I was actually scared of that thing. Every time I had to come on for that scene, it was always next to me, and I had to look up and I had to speak to him a few times, and it scared the hell out of me at 13.
Yeah, he was. I think he was more than 12 foot tall. The guy inside was about 6 foot, and he was on 2 foot painter stilts to extend his legs down. And then the head itself, his head was probably about neck height, and the whole head sat on top of his shoulders. And animatronically, it was a fairly simple one, but I was really happy. We got, I call it free movement. Sometimes instead of having to make every single thing mechanically, you try to do something so that when the performer leans, he can actually make the head look around. And with the giant, I found out that if you put the spine up into his head at an angle, all the performer had to do is lean forward and lean sideways, and it made the giant look, and you could actually point his head anywhere you wanted him to look without having to actually physically control that movement with some internal mechanisms and things.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, I think I've taken enough of your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Very nice to meet you, sir.
There you go.
Well, keep it nerdy, 'cause it's a trap. How nerdy is that?
Brilliant.